You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible.
Greetings. I'm Tory Russell, Ferguson frontline organizer, and on the behalf of many activists in the St. Louis area, I'm joined with Mike Brown Sr., the father of Mike Brown Jr. Today, we hold Black Lives Matter accountable. The movement that is catapulted into the limelight has forgotten about Ferguson and the freedom fighters. Freedom fighters like King D. Seals, Edward Crawford, and Danye Jones have literally given their lives to the struggle, but have rarely spoken about and families are not taken care of. Brother Ali, Joshua Williams, and many other political prisoners from the Ferguson movement are incarcerated or have been, and still has received no assistance from Black Lives Matter. What kind of movement are we building where we're saying Black Lives Matter, but the freedom fighters and the families are being left behind? Where is our restitution? Where is our organizing? Where is our building of a movement? We have groups like the Lost Voices and the Freedom Fighters here, and thousands of other youth activists in their 20s and 30s have been out in the streets protesting for months and months and years for years. Still forgotten. We're asking that Black Lives Matter leadership funds $20 million to Ferguson organizers, organizations, and community foundations to do the work. We're not begging for a handout. We're coming for what we deserve. Today, as we demand the $20 million to go to Ferguson as restorative measures so we can continue what we started, here's what we'll be organizing. Annual commemorations around Mike Brown Jr.'s life, mutual aid programs, Black Panther-style programs and services to meet the needs of the people, community gardens and farms, and also organizing fellowships and stipends so we can fight white supremacy full time. This is what we started in Ferguson, and this is what we will continue.
This request comes after the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation revealed it received more than $90 million in donations in 2020, mostly after the death of George Floyd. Now, of course, the movement gave national attention following the protests that took place with, in many ways, a level of energy after Mike Brown. But remember, you also had events taking place before that where you had John Crawford III that took place in Beaver Creek, Ohio. You had, of course, Eric Garner in New York, previous deaths as well. This is the question that that has to be put out there, Greg. Black Lives Matter Foundation, they've come forward and announced they've got $90 million. How much has the NAACP got? How much has the National Urban League gotten? How much has other black organizations gotten? And now the question is, and this is real, if all of these groups, we had Derek on, and I've been told the NAACP has gotten in excess of $100 million. So the question now is, so if let's just say the NAACP got $100 million, and the Urban League got $100 million, and Black Lives Matter got $90 million. That's nearly $300 million that has come in after the death of George Floyd. The point they're raising is, which is a legitimate question, should the local organizations that sparked these protests that made the story go national, what are they owed?
Roland, you made a very good point the other day, brother, when you were engaging in the conversation about the nature of relationship between national organizations and local branches or local chapters. This isn't anything new. We made that point with NAACP, with the Urban League. The distinction between those formations and Black Lives Matter is that Black Lives Matter really started as a kind of social media phenomena that very quickly pulled into formation long distance runners, folk who had been involved in movement work, folk who were new to movement work, folk who came in to pose and take pictures and grift off movement work. And the epicenter of Ferguson, and as you said, I mean, we go back to 2014 with Trayvon Martin. the idea then the impact of social media is now you have formations that didn't begin as formations. When they called the meeting at Cooper's Union in 1909 to form what became the NAACP, black people were in the minority. In fact, they kept Ida Bell Wells off of the league. And so what you've always had with the NAACP is a tension between local chapters and local branches, college chapters, and the national, which has been heavily influenced by corporate donations. And here's where I'm going with this. You see, liberation struggles are not subsidized. And if history has taught us anything, certainly in the previous iteration in the 60s with SNCC, with the Panthers, what you see is that the minute there are huge infusions of cash in clusters, and what was not released last week were the names of the big donors, you're seeing an attempt to influence the direction of a movement. This country is a corporation that uses politics as a shield. When Billie Holiday in the first chapter of her memoir, Lady Sings the Blues, said, not the first chapter, it's one of the subsequent chapters, when she says, when it was the United States versus Billie Holiday, she said, I felt like it was the whole United States versus me. Sis, you're right. It is the United States versus black people. It is the police versus black people. It is state violence. So while they give you some money to try to generate some data and build a network, meanwhile, the killings keep going. Meanwhile, the state is surveilling you. Meanwhile, you have to worry about where you're going to lay your head at night. So redistributing this money in any way that could actually lead to liberation work might mean the money dries up, as SNCC. And that is the devil's balance that this new formation that's trying to build itself at the same time as trying to fight is trying to strike. So this isn't anything new at all. If people are trying to pay for your liberation, you in trouble. You need to crowdsource it.
The demand is quite interesting, Kelly, because there were a lot of people who fundraised off of Ferguson. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of individuals who, off of Ferguson, have gotten book deals, podcasting deals, speaking deals, have flown all around the world, been the guest of folks in Hollywood and Oscar parties and all sorts of stuff. But I go back to, what do we do about the entities, the people who are still there, who are still on the ground, who are still fighting for change in Ferguson? We were there in St. Louis. You had Tashara Jones, who just took first place in the mayoral election. You got the runoff taking place on April 6th. You have Wesley Bell, who was elected DA there, Kim Gardner, and those black folks are catching hell. Trust me, St. Louis is about to, the white folks in St. Louis is about to really go crazy if you're going to have a black mayor, a black city DA, a black county DA, all of them at the same time. Oh, yeah, it's about to be some problems. So what do national organizations owe local organizers?
I feel like they owe them everything, especially when it comes to Black Lives Matter. I can't speak on NAACP. I can't speak on the National Urban League because, frankly, the structure of each of those organizations are something in which actually feels like a corporation. So any monies that go into those organizations, it actually is understandable why they have that influx of cash. Because
no. But let's remember, the money came in, Kelly, after George Floyd's death. So so companies were trying to park it somewhere. But the question still, even for the NAACP, Urban League, or any other national group, what do they owe the local people? What do they owe the local organizers in Minneapolis? What do they owe them in Ferguson? What do they owe them in Louisville with Breonna Taylor?
I understand that. That's what I was getting to. So when it comes to National Urban League and NAACP, it is a true organization. So what I'm saying by that, I mean, they have lawyers on deck to actually try these cases that come through regarding police brutality, regarding race discrimination and the like. They have a team. When it comes to National Urban League, I see the monies in the that go out. At least I live in D.C., so I see where that money is going when it comes to National Urban League. I can't tell you exactly where where the benefit is coming from regarding Black Lives Matter money. I do not see Black Lives Matter things or initiatives happening in my community. I don't see them happening in the Baltimore community, which is where I was born and my family still live. I don't see Black Lives Matter anywhere, but I do see the NAACP, but I do see National Urban League. So when it comes to the 90 million that got to Black Lives Matter, where exactly did it go? Because if you don't have an answer for that, then the conclusion that I have to come to, frankly, is that those monies, when you do find them, it needs to go to those families. There should be no reason why Michael Brown's family is in the predicament that they're in, scraping for funds to commemorate their son. Because there would be no Black Lives Matter without Michael Brown. There would be no Black Lives Matter without Freddie Gray or Trayvon Martin or anybody that has come since the movement started. So the fact that that Black Lives Matter is in this predicament, frankly, I saw it as a long time coming. I did not think it was nearly as much as $90 million, but I was wondering what they were doing with this money because the local chapters don't have it. The regional chapters don't have it if they have a regional chapter. So National Black Lives Matter movement, I don't even know who the head is, really. I know who founded it. When I go online, I see what their policy is, what their initiatives are. But
we've had Patrice. Well, first of all, we've had Patrice Cullors on the show, who is the leader of the Global Network, who explain all of that. But the point that you're raising, Reese, I've heard some NAACP chapters say we ain't seeing the money. So, I mean, again, let's just be real. I'm talking about, and I've been on the ground. I've been on the ground in multiple states where I've heard folks say, hey, National isn't kicking that money back. I've already heard folks even raising the question, all right, all this money came in. The bottom line is this here, and when I talk about the money, I look at the money from two perspectives. Not just how much money came in, but Reese, I want to know what race equity indexes, scorecards are being established by these entities. So here's what I mean. If you're Black Lives Matter Global Network, the foundation, and money's coming in, and if you're the NAACP and money's coming in, and you're the National Urban League and money's coming in, and you're the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and Lawyers Committee and money's coming in, I want to know, are those organizations looking at the check and saying, okay, you're donating $1 million. I need to see the blacks on your board of directors. I need to see who are your black senior officers. I need to see what is your supplier development with black businesses. I need to see, are you investing money in black banks? I need to see, are you also spending money on black media? I need to see, are you using black law firms? I need to see, are you using black bond companies? I need to see, are you using black advertising agencies? See, if you start asking those questions, that $1 million they gave could be paltry compared to the monies that black entities could be receiving by virtue of doing business with the company. I don't know if those questions are being asked and demanded before the checks are being deposited.
That's a good point, Roland. I think, one of the issues that we have is that we go by what's most popular, and it's easier to write a check to a big name, and I have great respect for the NAACP, particularly the Legal Defense Fund, which does amazing work, and the Urban League, and even the Black Lives Matter movement. But I think what the issue is that all this money flows through them, and so they're the middleman. or they're cash hoarders. I can't speak on the positions of NAACP and Urban League, but specifically with Black Lives Matter, they have $60 million cash on hand out of the $90 million. So the money is still there, but essentially they don't have the protocols in place. They don't have the criteria in place to really distribute that money in a timely manner. And maybe perhaps they're concerned about it drying up and they don't want to make promises and things of that nature. But the bottom line is that I make this point about, validating black outlets, black creators, black businesses, is that we have to sometimes ourselves think beyond the big names and actually look at what's happening in our local communities. And sometimes we have a mistrust of our local community organizations, because we feel like if they're not big enough, then they're not credible, or that they're not doing the work. And we want to see, an organization that has image awards and has, galas and has all these other things that make us feel like, oh, they're legitimate and they're major. And so I think that one of the things that we can do as individuals who want to see change is actually funnel our own money into these local organizations. It's not going to make headlines, not going to make national headlines, but it can actually impact your community. And what the NAACP, the Black Lives Matter movement, all these other places can do is actually vet these organizations. The NAACP has an extensive number of chapters, far more than Black Lives Matter does, but actually funnel that money to local organizations. It's the same thing that we saw during the 2020 election, where local voting rights, civil voting activists and community organizations were galvanizing people, and we saw the results of that in Georgia. And so I think that we have to shift the way that we look at philanthropy, shift the way that we look at activism, shift the way that we look at how our money is being spent, and actually do the research ourselves instead of just writing a check to a big name organization. Or in some cases, people create their own organizations that have high overhead, that don't, like you said, don't recycle black dollars, and nothing is getting solved. $300 million can go a long way, but if you're only funneling that money to the big name organizations and the food bank down the street, or the people who take, that provide, relief to people in their community, they get asked out, like Michael Brown is saying. I don't know where $20 million comes from, but to their point, the local people, the people that are doing the work, if they get shut out, that's a problem. So if you can't spend the money, then get the money to the organizations that can. The last thing I'll say is this is something that they did, particularly with the immigration aspect, when there was the child separation that was happening, where you had the immigrant activist organizations where they said, okay, we have too much money. These are other organizations that you should be sending the money to at this point. And so sometimes organizations have to say, hey, time out. Don't just donate to us, donate to these organizations. If it's a Minneapolis thing, go talk to the Minneapolis Bail Fund or whatever the situation may be, and try to not necessarily hoard all the money themselves.
Mm-hmm. This is also for people who don't even understand, who have no understanding of history. Greg, this is not new. The reality is Ella Baker was a huge critic of national entities coming into cities, sucking up the media attention, coming in, raising money, and then taking that money out. Dr. King was very cognizant of that. April 3rd, 1968, at that speech at Mason Temple, the mountaintop speech, he talked about the SCLC opening a bank account with a black bank there in Memphis. Folks were being very deliberate with that. What I hear from Michael Brown's dad and this organization is we are here doing the work. We are starving in order to mobilize and organize our people to actually affect change. Yet all of y'all others came in and raised money off of us, and none of that money ever came back to our community.
Right. Well, Roland, you're right. I mean, I'm glad you raised the name of Ella Baker in that regard. It's funny. I was just reading a book, small book that was published by the congregation at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. Dr. King, in that call, he has direct experience with that. During the Montgomery bus boycott, as they were raising money literally from pennies to dollars from black communities and others all over the country, every time they would get money in Montgomery, they distributed that money across 10 black banks in the country. That allowed them to buy a fleet of cars. That allowed them to pay for repairs for those cars. That allowed them to pay for fines as the Montgomery police tried to put them out of business by fining the taxis for not paying the fare or whatever. In other words, it was, and Reese's point is a point we really have to really consider, I think, and you're making the same point. When each gives a little from what we have, we don't have to do a lot. No individual has to do a whole lot. That is the philosophy if you're talking about a liberation struggle. We live in a capitalist society. The tiny black elite, the tiny black upper class has benefited from the black movements that have taken place in this country. But in a capitalist structure, it is created in a way to engender this aspiration to become a member of that tiny group, not realizing that there's a cap on the number of people that can be in that class in a capitalist system. Mm-hmm. So when you're dealing with the poor, when you're dealing with folks out on the streets of Ferguson, these corporations, these big donors are giving money, but the money will then go to reinforce the structure of civil and human rights work, the template for which is set by the political economy of the country. So then what you're going to see is these emerging institutions will look like the legacy institutions. They'll have directors, they'll have secretaries, they'll have offices, they'll be paying rent in buildings they don't own, they'll be flying in car and staying in hotels they don't own. And in other words, and they'll be pushing for policy, incremental policy change. And if they do go out and hire black folk, if these corporations hire, it'll be individuals. It's the same kind of model that creates the slim, well, not slim possibility. What Randall Robinson critiqued in his memoir when he was talking about the late Vernon Jordan, our new ancestor, he called it Vernon Jordan syndrome. Because remember, Vernon Jordan left the Urban League and went into private practice and said famously, I ain't no civil rights leader. In other words, when you have individuals make advancement as a result of group movement, you're not going to see in the society those who are at the top, because that ain't the black middle class, who are hanging on this precarious perch by their fingernails. You're going to see those at the top. They're going to invest in keeping that system going. They may let a few Negroes in, but them people on the streets of Ferguson, hell no. That's why the police attacked them. The only choice, well, I won't say the only choice, the best strategy we have, as Reese just said, every one of us needs to do and follow the model that you're building here with Roland Martin Unfiltered. Everybody put something on it. And if anything comes from other places on top of that, let's work so that that's gravy. Because, see, the minute they do that, as the great Lauryn Hill once said, funny how money change a situation. Mm-hmm. They're investing. They're not donating. Reese's right. We got to rethink this notion of philanthropy.
See, and I'm going back to this notion of the race index. Because what it does is it forces the true change in these companies. And it doesn't give them the out when they come with a few dollars. And that's, to me, and again, that's how the thinking has to be different. Because what we have to realize is that when an individual or an entity, a corporation, decides to make that donation, they're doing it for a reason. Mm-hmm. There are those who are doing it for the purpose of generating positive attention. There are those who are doing it to be able to say they're associated with someone. But we have to not be as so desperate for the check to go, hold up 1 second. Let's have a broader conversation about your company and what it is that you're doing. See, we were discussing the other day Walter Geer's criticism with regards to Ad Color and them hiring a company with Drago. I got an email from them, from the folks with them, and they said that no, they didn't hire them. He had his facts wrong. That wasn't the case. But I asked the same question when organizations hand out diversity awards. Mm-hmm. And we're living right now in a time where everything is DEI, 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 diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. And I go, well, who's actually benefiting other than the DEI person y'all hired?
That's right.
See, I think our demands have to be far deeper and bring a much different level of accountability. I go back to, and y'all keep hearing me talk about it, I go back to Operation Breadbasket. They did not, starting with Reverend Leon Sullivan in Philadelphia, going to SCLC, moving to Chicago, they didn't go to companies and say, hire black people. They didn't go to companies and say, well, donate to our cause. No, they approached them in a vertical and a horizontal way. They said, we want to see people here, 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 here. Money going here, here, here. To me, the power of organization is when a company comes with a check and you say, thanks for the check, but let's talk about some other stuff. Said company, what partnership do you have in any way with your nearest HBCU?
Good question.
If there's no HBCU that's in your city or in your state, okay, what partnerships do you have with your predominantly black high schools to drive folks to 2-year, 4-year institutions? See, this is where, to me, organizations have got to be far more intentional and deliberate in making demands and not be short-sighted in this is what they gave to us, because, to Reese's point and to Greg's point about us giving back, if the power of the organization drives value to the black law firm, the black accounting firm, the black engineering firm, the black architecture firm, the black bond company, the black ad agencies, black-owned media, and all the black, you now are creating not $1 million check, but you're now creating $5, $8, $10, $20, $30, $50 million in business. And so now those very black institutions can in turn give a check to the NAACP, give a check to the National Urban League, which then makes it where you don't have to depend on the corporate support. You're depending on your people funding you, so you have the freedom to make those very demands.
That's right.
And that makes perfect sense. But at the same time, that is a very forward-thinking, in the future perspective.
No, it's not. It's right now. It's not in the future.
For BLM, it is in the future, because right now they have $90 million and they're not giving it to people who are on the ground.
No. It's not forward. It's right now. While we were having this conversation, Kelly, I literally sent a text to one of the Black Lives Matter people. And I specifically said, hey, is BLM establishing a race equity index for those corporations giving them money? The response was, let me check. That's what I know of. After this show, I'm going to be on the phone with them. See, I'm not waiting for the future. What I'm saying right now, I'm going to send the very same text to Derek Johnson of the NAACP and to Mark Muriel of the National Urban League, because this is the moment for us to properly leverage the power. So it shouldn't be. So I'm not saying, and what I'm talking about is not even just national. The same thing goes for the individual chapters. You mentioned it. These regional NAACP chapters, these state branches, local chapters, same thing. What I'm saying is this should be modus operandi for any black institution. If you're trying to come to us and latch on to us to be able to say, I stand with the Freemasons, I stand with Eastern Star, I stand with the Alphas, do you have a race index that is 360 degrees supporting of black If not, you can't stand with us.
And that makes perfect sense. And I agree with you. But even though you just sent that text message out right now, that is not the case. That's what I mean by in the future. It will happen, but right now it's not.
Right.
So right now they have $90 million. And right now, Michael Ferguson's family is asking for $20 million because the $90 million that BLM has is due in part because of the work that the Ferguson family put in on the ground when their son died. It is due in part to the people who were killed by police after Michael Ferguson. I'm not talking about police brutality. I'm talking about the people found in their cars burnt up down in Ferguson, Missouri. You know, It's due in part to those things. So right now, I would say that they need this $20 million. Right now, I would say whatever's going on with BLM, until they get that race index that you talked about, which they absolutely need, they need to give the money that they have right now to these local chapters, to the family of Michael Ferguson, to the family of Michael Brown, to the family of George Floyd and Trayvon Martin and the like. Because it appears to me right now that those families, that those organizations associated with those families are actually doing more work on the ground than BLM and their $90 million.
Well, I think it's important, as you say, Kelly, I mean, okay, one thing is the network doesn't have the infrastructure. So part of it is building the infrastructure. And that was, for example, one of the key...
Actually building that on the fly. They're literally building it on the fly.
No question about it. Which was one of the great values of having an Ella Jo Baker, who had deep experience with these civil rights organizations, stand between the NAACP, between Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and the young people of SNCC to help them see how to do that. Now, if you look, for example, at Black Futures Lab, at Alicia Garza, who's not in the BLM formation now. That type of research-based driven model is there, but the challenge is, and I think, Kelly, you hit it right on the head. You know, if they want, and, you know, I've been listening to, I know some of the people on Black Lives Matter DC, BLM Philly, some of the places saying, we're not getting this money. One of the excuses that has been offered is, well, if you all don't have bank accounts, if you don't have the infrastructure, then we can't do the transfers. We've got these grants of up to $500,000 or $50,000. But here's the problem. The movement is not based on an infrastructure like that. You're talking about like, you know, these young people out here at BLM DC who are taking on gentrification, who are out here putting themselves in harm's way, who are really interacting with and dealing with our people who are going to be who are food insecure and housing insecure. They haven't set up a place for the transfer, and that really speaks to the fundamental problem we have here. See, Roland, what you're talking about is developing a model that has existed in previous generations, but it was more, this was the genius in some ways of Whitney Young, which is what made his loss so tragic in the Urban League formation. Whitney Young would ask those kind of questions, but he wasn't a civil rights leader in the mold of a Dorothy Height, who had an independent base with the black women. He wasn't in the same model as Stokely Carmichael or John Lewis and the SNCC formation, James Foreman and them. He was part of that, but his job was to ask those kind of questions, which leads me finally to the question, how is BLM, how are any of our organizations operate? I know there's a Leadership Council of Civil Rights. I know there are formations that come together, but how are these organizations interfacing with each other so that everybody doesn't have to play every role and we can advance together?
That's a very good point.
I don't know that we'll ever get over the class tensions that some kind of coalition like that would unearth, because quite frankly, since the end of legal segregation, the common objective has fractured.
Reese, go ahead.
Yeah, so many excellent points. I think that there's a two-pronged thing. They're not mutually exclusive. I think what Roland is talking about, the racial equity index, is you give me a check and I don't just say thank you, I hold you accountable. And that's the opening part of a conversation. It's not the end part of the conversation. So I think there's that aspect. And then there's the aspect of, okay, once you get that check, what are you doing with it? And that's where the infrastructure comes in. And I think that, to Dr. Carr's point about that class tension, it's just my perception. But a lot of times when you have the movement, right, you have the activists, you have the people who really are every day putting their life on the line. And there seems to be sometimes, my perception again, there's this there's this adversarialness between like a corporate person. To Roland's point, you got to have an accountant. You have to have lawyers. You have to have people that have the skills to implement that infrastructure. And so many times there's this purity test where it seems like we're on opposite ends instead of looking at, well, listen, maybe I don't have all of the talking points. Maybe I don't have the rah, get out on the street, put my body on the line spirit that you do, but I do have the knowledge and skills to make this infrastructure work so that you can actually implement these goals and be impactful and find a way and find a manner in which you can distribute to the community. And so part of the things that has to happen is we have to resolve that class tension. We have to resolve these litmus tests, these purity tests that alienate people who actually can help in their own way. And so everybody is not going to be an activist. I hate when people call me activist because I'm like, I think that's an overstatement. I don't think that I deserve that title, but I have a lot of skills. I'm a financial manager. I have a lot of things that I can contribute to the situation as well. So that's where we have to find a role for everybody within these organizations and stop having this adversarial approach towards each other. We have to use, when you have the organization, Black people who have the skills in each of those roles and let everybody play their position. And I think that's a big part of the problem too, is that, to your point again, Dr. Carr, people are trying to play every position in the role, and you can't physically do it. And so to what Kelly is saying, you don't have the infrastructure. You need the infrastructure because then you got to figure out a way to explain $90 million to people. Or
well, my thing is, if you don't have but my biggest problem is if you don't have the infrastructure, why are you accepting $90 million?
So let me unpack that. Because I do think, I think we got to understand what's going on here. And that is this here. What Black Lives Matter is doing right now, folks, is no different from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. What Black Lives Matter is doing right now is no different from the Progressive National Baptist Convention. When Dr. King and others were in the National Baptist Convention USA, there was a scuffle on the podium. King wasn't there.
That's right.
Where a preacher was knocked down, fell off the podium, hit his head, and he died.
Yes.
They were kicked out of the National Baptist Convention USA, and they went and established what is now the PNBC, the Progressive National Baptist Convention. What did that mean? That meant they needed an office. They needed a phone line. They needed lights turned on. They needed a bank account. They needed corporate papers. They had to literally create an entity on the fly in the midst of activism.
But dear brother, where was the money coming from?
And that's my point.
No, wait, hold on. I'm not done yet.
Okay, my bad.
Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Same thing. SCLC's money came from labor unions, Walter Reuther, and others, but also the donations of Black people.
Right.
Now, here's the fundamental issue that, again, I understand the criticism of BLM, but I also understand BLM. BLM did not start as an organization.
Right.
It started as a hashtag.
Yes, sir.
It did.
They tried to even, because Black Lives Matter was already in the public domain, they couldn't trademark it. So they actually, and then what happened was you had people who quickly embraced Black Lives Matter, the phrase, because it was a perfect, all-encompassing phrase. Then it was like, well, damn, people are asking us to do stuff, do this, do that. Now we have to create something to meet the demand of the very people, because the people were saying, no. We ain't trying to align with the NAACP, the Urban League, National Action Network, Rainbow Push. We want something separate. So what they did was do actually something that you never do. You don't create a national entity after branches were already established. Normally, it's branches, state, region, national. BLM is actually
the inverse.
Actually, ain't even the inverse. It's branches, national, some branches tied to them,
right?
Some not. So you have BLM branches that are actually not even affiliated with the national, because imagine having NAACP chapters that are literally called NAACP chapters, not with NAACP. So you now are, from a branding standpoint, you now dealing with people saying, BLM's did this. And they like, that ain't us. But because they have the name BLM, it's all encompassing. So you're dealing with people who are not, so you're trying to like, how can I catch up? So I'm gonna give the BLM organizers some leeway in trying to construct, because let me also say this here. There were a lot of black activists, young black activists, who shitted on the NAACP and the Urban League, them old ass groups. And you know what happened after Trayvon Martin? You know what happened after the protest when Obama was there? The same people who like, we got leaderless organizations. They realize the value of infrastructure.
You gotta have,
and that's my point.
And so now they're scrambling. Now it's like they're trying to catch up, and it is absolutely hard to try to build a building and work in the same building when you're trying to build it. It's damn near impossible. And so that's the struggle that's going on. So that's why when Patrisse Cullors was on, and when she was trying to, and I was like, okay, I'm trying to understand what's the foundation, what's the global network, what's this? And I was sitting there like, okay, Patrisse, I really don't know what the hell you're talking about, because they are trying to literally create an infrastructure with a runaway train, and that's hard as hell. Y'all go ahead.
Yeah.
And I completely understand that, and I am all for giving Black Lives Matter's grit, because, like you said, it is a daunting task, a seemingly impossible task. But my point is, not only is it possible, it actually needs to be done. And frankly, how much grace are we going to give BLM? Because it's been at least 4 years.
Actually, it hasn't.
90 million.
No, it hasn't. No, it hasn't. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. It hasn't. The problem that they've been having is they have been this, it hasn't been how you truly start an organization. And so
I understand that.
And so here's the deal.
I understand that point.
Here's the deal. First of all, I'm not in the organization, so I don't have to I don't have a dog in the hunt. And
I get that too.
What I do see happening is they are grappling with, how do you harness this thing, create hierarchy? Because, see, this is one of the problems, and Greg, because all these books you got behind you, I want you to speak to this. I don't care what you say. Y'all can go with that leaderless stuff all y'all want to. You can't show me any organization that doesn't have hierarchy. And their struggle, in my opinion, has been because they want to make group decisions. You can't make group decisions. You gotta have people in charge of fundraising, membership, public policy, boards. You gotta have leadership, and they're trying to do this thing leaderless, and that's a little hard, and they've learned that. So what happened? When Patrisse made herself head of the organization, people were like, what are you doing? Why'd you do that? Because somebody had to be the leader. So I see what's going on, and I see why people are frustrated, but this is just pure, y'all, organization building. It's the growing pains, and guess what? No black organization has ever had $90 million from at the outset, and now you're trying to figure out what the hell do we even do? That's what's going on here, and I get it. Greg, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's a problem, Roland. You're right. What you just described. I mean, you know, when you mentioned the Baptist Convention and the Progressive National Baptist It's funny, man, because I went down a rabbit hole the other night. I started reading a collection of essays by Lewis Clayton Jones, who's a lawyer, very important civil rights figure. But his brother was William Augustus Jones, who, as you know, followed King out and was one of the founders of the Progressive National Baptists, and it was the pastor of Bethany Baptist Church in New York. And I raised that because, you know, as many times as I, as a 15-year-old with my grass cutting money, gave up 10% when the man got up in the pulpit and asked, will a man rob God? We understand that even with the split, they had a steady source of income from the churches where people paid their tithes. Now, why is that important? Individuals don't beat institutions. So when you're trying to build an institution around a concept or an idea or a feeling or a protest or a general strike against a social order, unlike the black church, which was the foundation for so much of what we've been able to push forward. And I'm not saying the black church exclusively, because what you mentioned, for example, in terms of faith-based organizations, for example, you see a fracturing among the Muslims. Remember when Father Allah or Clarence 13X leaves, and then you have the Nations of Gods and Earths came out of the Nation of Islam. You got Silas Muhammad. They still selling Muhammad Speaks because they have the right to have that because they were able to trademark it. And the Nation of Islam has the final call because they can't even use the name after Elijah Muhammad died in 75, so on and so on. But if you say Muslims, black, even the Sunni or Shia Muslims, people think you're talking about the Nation of Islam.
No. Hold. I need you to go back right there, because I think some people just missed what you said. When the Nation of Islam, when Elijah Muhammad dies,
yes,
and his sons take them into a mainstream Islamic organization. That's right. When Farrakhan says, I want to rebuild the nation, he couldn't just do it. There were things he could not say and do.
Legally, that's right. That's why they have to sell the final call. That's why it's not called Muhammad Speaks. He didn't own the. In fact, what do they call it in the nation, Roland? What do they call it? The second, the resurrection, or I get the phrase they use. Anyway, I'm saying all this to say the point you're making is very critical. If you're trying to build an organization around a concept, but you have no pre-existing infrastructure, that's a setup to begin with, and you almost got to do it very incrementally, as you said, from the grassroots up. But then here come these people who have an investment. What's their investment? They want the social order to continue, and they want to have it as smooth as possible. They come in and write you a big ass check. That could be a recipe for chaos now.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I'll stop there, because what you're really doing, Roland, is trying to help people think through how they can do something that literally hasn't been done before, not to my knowledge, in this country.
And Kelly, that's why the difference between BLM and Color of Change is Color of Change doesn't accept any corporate donations, but they also were structured from the beginning like an organization. So when they grew, you didn't have all this drama. Go ahead.
No, I completely agree with the points being made right now. I don't want to come off as if I disagree with you, Roland, or anybody.
No one's disagreeing. We're just walking through a set of facts, because a lot of people really have no idea what the hell we're talking about. There are a lot of people out there who just say stuff, who don't even understand how it started, how it's constructed. They don't even realize that there were 3 founders of Black Lives Matter, and 2 of them are not with the group. Alicia Garza has a separate organization. Oprah is not there. Patrisse Cullors is only the last of the 3 original who's actually leading the organization. Most folks don't even understand that. Alicia Garza still gets jammed up about Black Lives Matter. She's like, y'all, I'm not with the organization. Go ahead.
And I get that. I'm just going back to the point of the Ferguson and the Brown family wants $20 million from BLM because they have not seen basically the fruits of their labor since 2014. And when you go on blacklivesmatter.com, their about page is centered on Ferguson, Missouri, and Michael Brown. So the fact that the Brown family has not received anything of significant weight from this movement, from this now foundation, I don't care how long or short it has been since the formation of it, they now have $90 million because of this family, because of the boots on the ground people in Ferguson, Missouri.
But that's
the
but
fact
that's
that
not
they are
true.
struggling right now is
That's not true. The 90 million is
true?
the 90 million is because George Floyd got killed.
Oh.
The bulk of the money, Kelly, is not true. That's what I'm trying to. The point I'm trying to make, and this is the struggle. This is the struggle, and I totally get Mike Brown, because here's the piece: what Mike Brown lays out, Ferguson and Mike Brown's killing took the movement to another level. But do you ignore John Crawford III? Do you ignore that activism? Do you ignore the activism around Eric Garner, which happened a month before Michael Brown? So,
of course not.
So, but the bulk of the money came in because of the death of George Floyd. So the question, which I threw out originally, was, okay, do you give the money to Mike Brown, $20 million in Ferguson, when really the money is because of what happened with George Floyd? And so the overarching question is, for all these black organizations, if all of this money has come in since the death of George Floyd, what responsibility do they have to give to the local groups? And that's how I started this whole deal. But the money didn't come in because of Mike Brown. Some may have come at that particular point, and there was money that was raised then. But the bulk of the 90 is because of George Floyd.
Interesting.
Right.
So what do we do now?
It happened in the past year. I think that the thing about it is, like with the Ferguson argument, I get the argument that, hey, we've been on the front lines and we are activists and we have, had our blood, sweat, and tears on this. That's almost like a reparations type of argument in terms of like a restorative justice. Hey, give us a piece of the pie. I think if you say like what they're saying, but they're not saying that per se. They're also saying that, well, we're going to do all these things with the money. Okay, well then how do you, Michael Brown's organization, spend $20 million? Because Black Lives Matter hasn't been able to spend $90 million. They still have $60 million left over. $30 million they've given away to various causes, local chapters, et cetera, et cetera. So the question is not just a matter of who deserves what, but it's what are you going to do with the money? And that's what my original point was, is instead of always looking at the big name organizations, we can make that decision ourselves to donate to local causes. They're not as attractive because they don't have the big names and you don't get to necessarily have a hashtag that's going to go viral, but they are doing the work. And for these national organizations, if you have a situation where you have an influx of cash, like what happened after the George Floyd death, then you have some sort of system in place to how you distribute that money, not just amongst Black Lives Matter chapters, which there are chapters that are complaining about not getting any money from the national organization because the national organization has criteria for them, but all kinds of organizations that are credible organizations that are already on the ground doing the work. That is a way of actually making sure that everybody wins. It's recycling dollars. It's putting money back into the communities. But even still, $60 million is not going to solve all the problems of Black America. Neither is $300 million. But there has to be some sort of system when you do have these massive influxes of cash and you don't have the way of scaling up quickly enough to do something with it. You don't have an infrastructure to do something with it. Then my proposal would be, we'll at least put in the research and the efforts to identify local organizations, Black Lives Matter or not, to give the money to and let them do something.
And I can tell you, all three of y'all, after the death of Breonna Taylor, there were individuals in Louisville who were complaining about Until Freedom.
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
But then Until Freedom was telling people what local groups to support. I know some activists in Louisville felt one other activist used some money to buy a SUV and damn near ran her out of town. See, so what I'm laying out here is this conundrum. When you have one of these incidents and someone is killed and fundraising takes off, local groups. Look, I'm vice president digital for the National Association of Black Journalists. We got local chapters who complain when we have the national convention in a city and say, we ain't getting none of that money.
Right.
So I can take you through numerous national organizations where chapters complain, y'all not helping us. The problem here, which is what Reese alluded to, and Kelly spoke of as well, that the problem here is you have already established entities that have infrastructure that are able to accept donations. I can tell you oh man, I can't remember the brother's name. Oh man, I can't. Jaziri X.
Yeah, sure, Pittsburgh.
We were doing, I said, all right, I'm going to pick an organization to push on social media to give. Mm-hmm. I chose Jaziri X. He had no donate button on his website. And I was like, Jaziri, you're doing some great stuff. Bruh, how do we give? You need a donate button. There were a lot of entities that had no way of giving money because they did not have infrastructure.
Right.
So this thing is, I mean, it becomes, a catch-22 because, like, we got infrastructure, we don't, what do we do? And to Reese's point, that's a great point. How did Mike Brown and the folks there arrive at 20 million? Like, where did that number come from? And what are you going to do with 20 million? Now, what if BLM comes in and says, we're going to give $1 million to local organizers in Ferguson? Are folks going to reject it or accept it?
Accept.
I just think that this is a function of what happens when people reject established organizations, which that's their right. But if you don't create that thing the right way when you launch it, these are the headaches you're going to have.
It's true.
These are the headaches you're going to have.
Can I say one more thing, too? Because
final comment from each one of you before I go to break. Go.
Okay, yeah, I was looking at the comments in Facebook, and again, it goes back to what Dr. Carr said about this class tension. Somebody, for some strange reason, interpreted my comment to say that I don't want to be an activist. What I stated was, I'm not an activist, but I can contribute to the cause as a person who has skills such as project management, financial management, accounting.
Yeah, you're not defining yourself as an activist. That's all you're saying. You're like, that's not how I'm defining myself.
Right. But my point is, all of this stuff plays together. You can't have an infrastructure without people who have the skills to execute it. In my line of profession, I'm not a rocket scientist, but the rocket scientists need me to execute their program. And it's the same thing when it comes to activism. If you're going to accept money, if you're just out there marching on the streets and you're not a part of any affiliate, you're not affiliated and you're not getting money, more power to you. But when you have a $90 million organization, you need infrastructure. And so my whole point, which I just want to reiterate again, is when it comes to the infrastructure, then that's when you pull in to your point, Roland, Black people who have the skills, the law skills, the accounting skills, etc. You got to take some of the class tension out, take some of the purity politics out of it, and seek those people out. Because what ends up happening is when they do finally scale up, a lot of times they don't look at us. They look at the white folks or somebody else. They feel like they're more established or they're more credible. So we have the ability within our communities to build the infrastructure. It might not be with all the slogans and all of the purity politics, but seek those people out and marry that together. And then you can actually do something with the money that you're getting instead of having to sit there and account and then everybody's pissed off at you.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I would just agree. I agree with you, Reese. Everybody has skills they can contribute. And the only way we're going to advance collectively is to do it in collective formation, networks. Call on people who have these skills. One of the reasons that the federal government decided that the Black Panthers were the greatest threat to American national security was because they were organizing from the ground up. the liberation schools, the free breakfast programs, the health clinics, and they were calling on folks who had expertise. You didn't have to be a Panther to give somebody checkup. Read Robin Spencer's work on the Black Panthers and their medical, you know what I'm saying? But you wanted to lend your skills. Jeffrey Haas, who was the white dude who took the state of Illinois and Chicago and the feds to court on the murder of Fred Hampton. You know, they created the People's Law Center because the Panthers approached them in coalition with the Young Lords, with the Young Patriots, and say, look, we need lawyers. So, I mean, it's important to understand without coalition, we're not going to be able to advance. And finally, what we saw in Ferguson, now, maybe one of the reasons they're calling for $20 million is because, yes, this money isn't here because of Ferguson directly, but the catchment that kind of accrued over the last year during we've had this pandemic is a direct result of the fear from everybody from government to corporate America that there was about to be a purebred revolution in this country. So they threw some money to stop it. One of the reasons they may be holding on to the money is they don't know if they're going to get another windfall like this. And one of the reasons Ferguson folk are saying we want 20 million is because it is the momentum over the arc of this movement, this unbroken momentum that created the concept for these people to throw some money at. This is going to have to be worked out in some behind-the-scenes discussions, and everybody has a role to play. We just got to know how, as Reese said, we got to go know where we can get in to fit in. That's all.
Kelly?
Exactly.
I agree with everyone on the panel. Like I said, once again, I don't have an issue with anything that anyone has said. I don't even have an issues with the comments that are coming in saying that I don't know what I'm talking about. I do. But what I will say is that regardless of where the money came from, BLM would not have been in a position to receive it at all had it not been for the people in Ferguson. So the fact that they are asking for anything at this point, the fact that they have to ask for anything at this point, when frankly, Ferguson and the Michael Brown family is on their page front and center as basically a selling point to donate. The fact that they do not receive anything, at least that's my understanding from what I've seen thus far, they do not receive anything significant from BLM. That is insulting. And it is a disgrace to not only the movement as a whole, but to the Brown family. Because their son died and they reached out for help. BLM comes through, you know, and we have this entire movement spurred from the pain of one family. And they are still struggling to keep their son's memory alive, even though BLM is frankly now profiting off of it. Even though the 90 million came from George Floyd, they profited off of the Brown family.
Where on their website are they doing that? Where? This is the site right here.
I'm literally the About page on blacklivesmatter.com under her story.
Gotcha. Under the About page, under her story.
In 2014, Mike Brown was murdered by Ferguson police. It was a guttural response to be with our people, our family, in support of the brave and courageous community of Ferguson and St. Louis as they were being brutalized by law enforcement.
Yeah, but you skipped over the top. This is the top.
I'm not skipping over the top.
Actually, hold up. No, wait, hold up. I'm reading the top right now, Kelly. This is how it began. In 2013, 3 radical black organizers, go to my Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi, created a black-centered political will and movement building project called Black Lives Matter. It was in response to the acquittal of Trayvon Martin's murderer, George Zimmerman. So here's the question. Does the Trayvon Martin family and the organizers in Sanford, Florida, and Orlando, should they get some money?
Absolutely.
All of it? No, but they absolutely should be getting something.
Right. No. Here's what I'm saying. I'm reading the body of the article, and I do see where it mentions what took place with Mike Brown. But it also mentions Tamir Scott, Tanisha Anderson, Maya Hall, Walter Scott, Sandra Bland. Then it goes into what took place in Ferguson with Mike Brown. And so it has all of that. And so the point that I am making, the last paragraph, it says, the Black Lives Matter Global Network would not be recognized worldwide if it weren't for the folks in St. Louis and Ferguson who put their bodies on the line day in, day out, and who continue to show up for Black lives. So, so what you just brought up raises the point that I brought up from the beginning. When we talk about supporting organizations, if we start going back to, well, like like what kicked off, like what began something. I say it point blank, at the Ferguson protest took what was happening to another level. But it started with, this hashtag started with Trayvon Martin. Then after the death of Trayvon Martin, there were other cases that took place. Aiyana Jones in Detroit, Rekia Boyd in Chicago, Eric Garner in New York. So the question I'm still asking, which I still think national organizations have to answer, and that is, if you are a national organization and you were fundraising off of these major deaths of black people, what responsibility do you have to local organizers in those cities? What I'm saying is that I believe there is a responsibility not just for Ferguson, but also for Eric Garner in New York City, also for the black activists in Ohio with John Crawford III, also for the black activists BYM 100, I think it's black in Chicago with Rekia Boyd and Aiyana Jones. The biggest question that this brings is, how do you stand with local entities who typically kick these things off? Kenosha, are people providing any resources to local activists in Kenosha, Wisconsin? This, to me, is what BLM, the NAACP, and others, if you are a if you are a black group and you have gotten a windfall,
yes, sir,
because of these events,
say this, brother,
you too should be addressing this question, and not just BLM. BLM should be addressing it. And so that is the conundrum that I think folks are in, because the local organizers, yes, they are frustrated by saying, we still have work to do. Where y'all at? Where are the people? Where are all the people who, when I was in St. Louis, they were like, yo, where are the people who are all here, who made their names off of Ferguson?
Come on, brother.
Where are those individuals who have been going to the Aspen Institute, who have been going to, who become fellows at Harvard, and who have been with the United Nations across the world? See, it's a whole bunch of folk.
Come on, brother.
It's a whole bunch of folk not tied to BLM.
Unfiltered.
Who got some questions they got to have answered to, because they have benefited greatly from Ferguson and Eric Garner and all these other cases, and yes, George Floyd. Yeah. Those are the questions that have to be asked. And so, look, we're going to continue asking them. Bottom line is, we created this platform to have this conversation. Is a whole bunch of other stories that I was going to get to, we're not getting to, but we got to be able to put this out there. We've got to be able to have people who want to talk about this. We got people who have to answer this, because if you are doing things in the public space on behalf of black people, then you have to be accountable to black people, which means that you have to be transparent. So since BLM did this here, I'm going to send an email and a text to Derek Johnson and Mark Morial and to Sherilyn Ifill, and who now leads the Lawyers Committee and also Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. We're going to ask all of them, are y'all going to release a report on how much you've raised since the death of George Floyd? And what are your plans for it? To me, that's a legitimate question.
Sure.
I think it's a legitimate question. And we'll see what their response is. All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends, go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have that you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.